I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. Everything I do so instinctive.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, degenerate sleuths of the night. We gather to boldly go where others have refused. Welcome to the DT show, you salty mofos.
A man accused of killing 4 college students is behind bars, and he has ties to northeastern and central Pennsylvania. State police say 28-year-old Bryan Kohberger was arrested this morning in a home in Chestnut Hill Township.
I can't find any case law that would support that idea. That somehow a warrant would be needed for DNA left at a crime scene.
We are expected to learn more about the allegations against the girlfriend of a Boston police officer who was found unresponsive in the snow Saturday morning. I-Team sources say Karen Reed was in a relationship with John O'Keefe. She's facing charges including motor vehicle homicide and manslaughter.
So, the Commonwealth just provided the court with information that causes me grave concern. The implications of that information may have profound effects on this defense and defense counsel.
So, get your popcorn ready and your choice of drink. Get your butt on your seat. Like, comment, and subscribe for a treat. Here we go. It's time for the show. The Drunk Turkey Show.
How's everybody doing? Welcome back to the show. Hope everybody's had a great week. The end of the week is here. My gosh, it's Friday already. Middle of March. What happened to the first quarter of the year? It's just gone by so quickly. Before you know it, we're going to be at the trial date for Bryan Kohberger. A lot of documents have been dropped throughout this entire process. But if you go and check out the website there, for the Idaho website that has all the documents and stuff, and you go and look at the other cases that are there, nowhere near the amount of filings and motions to compel, et cetera, and it's just going by real fast now. The closer we get, I think the faster it's going to get, and before we know it, it'll be time for a trial. Well, I want to thank everybody here. I want to thank all our newest subscribers and viewers and members. We did jump up quite a bit here recently, so I want to thank all you guys. I want to thank all our previous subs and members, everybody that's here. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much for getting the content out. That's what it's really about, right? It's making sure that the right stuff gets out, good information, and above all, the truth. You know what I mean? Today I woke up and I looked at the news and I saw this headline, and it said that Bryan Kohberger's defense team plans to, introduce a frame job theory in trial. And I knew it was coming. I've called this out for a while. There was a court hearing not too long ago. I want to say about 4 or 5 months ago, a couple of different hearings. There was one where they mentioned planting of the sheath. There was another one where Ann Taylor, she had mentioned, she does this really good. Where somebody will ask a question or make a statement, and then she'll go into it like, oh, well, now that you bring that up, but she does it in a manner like she has something like hidden under her sleeve. Like, for instance, when they brought up the knife sheath, she's like, oh, well, we're going to be asking questions about this knife sheath, aren't we? Like, what is a knife sheath? How important is it? And then the judge goes, well, it's pretty dang important, when it's when it's a murder and the victims were, killed by a knife. And so when all that went down, I kind of put out there, I was like, The state or the defense is only going to be, or the defense is so far that somebody planted his DNA, that somebody framed Bryan Kohberger. I often said there's nothing in any of these documents that says that they're fighting the fact that Bryan Kohberger's DNA was the one that's on the sheath. None of it. There's no one document that is questioning the validity of the fact that Bryan Kohberger's DNA is the one on the sheath. They've all but have accepted it. You know what I'm saying? And the state drops a document the other day, and let's pull it up. In the state's document, and this is the state's response to the defendant's motion in limine, exclude IGG evidence. And I'll go through some of this, not all of it, but just a few of it. Oh yeah, it is Thursday. I'm thinking it's Friday already. My bad, guys. I'm telling you, I just woke up from a nap. I'll be honest with you. All righty. So comes now the state of Idaho response to the defendant motion in limine regarding investigative genetic genealogy, IGG. The defense's motion rests in accurate factual assertions on the erroneous legal standard. Nevertheless, the state does not object to and has, in fact, also moved for exclusion of the IGG information at trial. Now, here's the interesting thing about this document, and I highly suggest everybody go through and read it. I'm not going to go through everything today. I'm only going to go through the part that is referencing our topic, which is the frame job theory. I'm going to go in through here, and then we'll discuss, how feasible and how probable and how realistic and what would really be required for a frame job theory, for a frame job to have occurred. And then maybe at the end, we'll kind of discuss whether or not it was, if it's, there's any realistic opportunity for that to have been true. So, but in here, it's some good stuff. A lot of it goes into kind of disproving much of what, like, for instance, these many emotions are. How we've seen like 10th motion to compel here, 15th motion there. And it appears in what they're saying, and majority of it is basically that in many of those motions to compel and stuff like that, they're asking the same questions to answers they've already gotten, and they've explained it, and they highlight different motions and different times in hearings when it's been brought up and things like that. I thought this was a great move by the prosecution, because up to this point, the defense has been utilizing these motions to try to sell a story, so to speak, right? And I think in this scenario here, the prosecution got out, maybe not necessarily in front of the defense or in front of everybody, but definitely in front of the defense before the defense can put out their story of a frame job. And I like the fact that they did it, to be honest with you. But let's read the highlighted portions. It says here, the state argued, and this is the argument, the state argued that the IGG did not fall within rule of Idaho criminal rules because it was only used as a tip, and the state has no plans to present the IGG information for which the protective order is sought as evidence at trial, other than having an investigator testify only that they received a tip pointing law enforcement to the defendant, which is what is normal in most proceedings. And that's all they really needed to put in here, if anything. Again, they weren't arguing the fact that the defense wanted to have this information thrown out. But they were basically fighting back, so to speak, to a bunch of the stuff that Ann Taylor was going through or talking about. And like I said, I think they want to get ahead of what Ann Taylor's defense is going to be. So let's continue here. The strength of the evidence against the defendant in the terms of DNA evidence depends upon the confirmatory results of the STR DNA analysis between the defendant's DNA and the DNA recovered at the crime scene. Which is true. I mean, what they're talking about is the fact that the STR DNA is what is important, not necessarily the SNP. And then it goes on to say, here the IGG information is even less material, if that is possible, than it would be otherwise to have had been, because the defense has not disclosed to any experts or evidence to challenge the confirmatory STR comparison. The defense has disclosed an expert regarding DNA evidence interpretation and the likelihood ratio to challenge one of the state's conclusions concerning DNA. Now, remember, what was the one that they felt that they had, right? The likelihood challenge. What is the one thing that the defense has gone back to try to exclude via DNA? And that is the likelihood ratio of the mixed DNA under the fingernails of a victim, right? And all they have, that's the only evidence that they have come out and disclosed, and that's what they're talking about. So it just says the defense has only disclosed that one DNA evidence, one expert regarding DNA evidence interpretation and likelihood ratio to challenge one of the state's conclusions. So there's still, the state didn't concede that they were correct either, because they're challenging one of the state's conclusions concerning the DNA. And that was the DNA under the fingernail. So the state isn't saying, all right, yeah, you know what, Mr. Kohberger, you're right. You're excluded from there. You know, I wanted to hear what the state's response was going to be. Now, I didn't think that we're going to get a response in this, because this isn't the court to do it in. This is the court of public view right now, right? I didn't think this was the moment for the state to come out and say, hey, you know, we think it's him. But with this sentence here, by saying that they're going to challenge the conclusions of the state, then that means they're not falling back on it. I think this means that the state intends to say that the DNA underneath the fingernails of Madison Mogen is possibly Bryan Kohberger's. And remember, there was some stuff that was blacked out in that document, and that was the numbers that were basically the percentage of the likelihood that this person was one of the persons in the mixture, right? And to me, that's probably, you know, they blacked it out for a reason. They want anybody to look at it as probably a high number, maybe not exactly 1% that makes it that where somebody can say, yeah, that's 100% his, but I'm fairly positive it's going to end up showing up pretty high. And the defense is trying to argue it. You know, I would have thought, okay, if the defense has an expert that can say that, all right, by no shadow of doubt or whatever, that Bryan Kohberger is excluded out of this 3 DNA profile, the state would say something like, you know, they're just challenging the, you know, they have one person who's challenged the state's. Well, I mean, that's the way you got to say it. You know, I just feel like by putting this sentence in here, it's kind of emphasizing, though, that it's going to be a challenge and that the state's not conceding that that's not Bryan Kohberger's DNA. Let's continue here. The defense has not disclosed any experts to challenge the confirmatory of the STR comparison showing the DNA of the knife sheath matched to the defendant's DNA. On the contrary, the defense has disclosed that its forensic biology and DNA expert will testify that there is good support that Bryan Kohberger's DNA was found on item 1.1, a swab from the knife sheath. Instead of challenging the conclusion that the DNA on the knife sheath belonged to the defendant, the defense expert disclosures reveal that the defense plans to argue that the DNA on the knife sheath does not prove the defendant was ever at the crime scene and that the knife sheath itself could have been planted by the real perpetrator. All right, so there's 2 things in that last sentence. The defendant was never at the crime scene, and the knife sheath itself could be planted by the real perpetrator. So the first part is like, all right, just because his DNA is there doesn't mean that he was where the sheath ended up at, meaning that maybe he came in contact with somebody who was the real perpetrator and his DNA just so happened to get on it. Now, if that were to be the case, let's just look at it by accident, right? If this was an accident, we would have to believe that Bryan Kohberger accidentally came in contact with the real killer. The real killer would have no knowledge of Bryan Kohberger's schedule if this was an accident, right? Just an accidental happen. You know, he's walking in the grocery store. That guy's walking out of the grocery store. They bump shoulders. Bryan Kohberger's wrist exposed, just kind of touches somehow underneath the button of the knife sheath. Let's just imagine that's possible for the moment. That person would have to be out and about at the exact same time that Bryan Kohberger was. And during that specific time that Bryan Kohberger's phone went out of service, this is when that guy's committing the crime by coincidence. And coincidentally, he also drives the same vehicle as Bryan Kohberger and is roughly the same height, weight, build, and bushy eyebrows. It's a lot of coincidences to have happened, right? And not to mention, when Bryan Kohberger's phone comes back on, he's not west. He's not at the Walleye Park. He's not anywhere near west of Pullman. He's east of Pullman, south of Moscow. So you have to factor that aspect in as well. Like, all right, while the phone is off and then it comes back on, Bryan Kohberger's phone turns on. He's not in the direction his vehicle was heading last. So at some point he had to have turned around, right? You can't just magically appear there. Okay. So that I think that one has to be out. I don't think it could be an accident. For everything, the car, the time, his phone being off, the front license plate, the height and weight, like for all that, let's just say for it to have been an accidental contact, I think it's too much of a coincidence. I think for it to be anywhere near feasibly possible, it would have to be somebody who knew Bryan Kohberger, who knew his motions, his movements, and somebody who was trying to frame him, right? And they're in there. He's the real victim in this, right? He's somebody decided they were going to frame Bryan Kohberger, and they were just going to take out the Maddie, Kaylee, Ethan, and Xana. That's just collateral damage to Bryan Kohberger because he's the real victim. They're just trying, their lives was nothing because it just what the importance was putting Bryan Kohberger away. Now let's just say, okay, maybe that's not the case. Maybe somebody had a vendetta against one of these girls who also knew Bryan Kohberger and was like, all right, well, I'm going to take out these girls and I'm also going to frame this guy because I don't like him for whatever reason, right? Maybe it's a student of his. Only thing is, I'm fairly positive a lot of those people been investigated and spoken to, but let's just go forward with this. This person would have had to have known that Bryan Kohberger was going to be out that night, would have had to have known his schedule to the T and known that, all right, Bryan Kohberger turned off his phone at 2:40 or 2:54 a.m., or he was out of pocket for that amount of time. He would have had to have known the phone was off then. And then when he went into the house, or when he passed by at 3:30 and he didn't go in, he would have had to have known that he wasted an additional 38 minutes before he actually made entry into the house, because for whatever reason, I think it's because of a light that's on at the house to alert the DoorDash driver was on until 4, which is the reason why at 4:05 he begins to, stop and do all those weird driving motions. Well, anyways, he would have had to have thought, man, his phone was out of pocket for X amount of time. I've already spent 35 minutes driving around. How much time could he have left? And apparently he did it with just a few minutes to spare, right? Because once he got done, that's when Bryan Kohberger's phone turned on. And he would have had to have known that Bryan Kohberger, was going to be, his phone off. And when it came back on, that it was going to be in an area that was going to not be impossible for him to be at. For instance, he wasn't going to turn his phone on and be at the Walleye Park or in Oregon or somewhere, that is not feasible for him to reach. Right. So, like, for instance, when he came on was 28 minutes after the murders. I think it was his phone came back on at 4:48, 4:47, somewhere around there. And his vehicle seen at a high rate of speed at 4:20. So that's 28 minutes. So if at 4:48 when his phone came on, had he been an hour away from Moscow, that'd be different. That'd be a different story, right? That'd be hard to say it was him, given that amount of time and where he was at, right? But that's not the case. When his phone comes back on, he's merely 10 minutes away from Moscow. Interesting thing there, right? So how feasible is this that somebody would know Bryan Kohberger's moves and know him in how long, right? Because according to Bryan Kohberger's defense team, it's not like he's had the same habit for a while, right? This habit used to be jogging. And then as the year progressed, it went from jogging and hiking to more nighttime drives and looking at things. So it hadn't been the same MO. It changed over time. And how long had he been there? He'd been there since what, June? So that's June, July, August, September, October, November, like 5 months. So in 5 months, somebody would have had to have gotten Bryan Kohberger's movements and knowledge that was of those movements and where he was going and how long he was out, things of that nature. He would have had to have known those things within 5 months. And those things would have had to have been, those things are fluid. They're changing. They're one day or for a short period of time or however long period of time it was jogging. And then at certain points, I guess as it got colder, it turned into driving. And so another thing to throw in there. Plus, all right, did this person own, rent, buy? How did he come across a vehicle that matched Bryan Kohberger's, right? And if this person is close enough to Bryan Kohberger to be his arch nemesis and they hate each other, like, I'm pretty positive it wouldn't be that difficult for Bryan Kohberger to point out somebody else who drives a white Elantra. I mean, it would, for somebody to know his movements like this, you would think it would be easy for him to say, hey, this guy didn't like me. We had some problems. He drives a white car. It's similar to mine. Go look at him. Or does he think that this is just some random person that has no idea who, Bryan Kohberger's never met, and he's just doing this just to do this, right? Like, no reason, just, I choose you, Bryan Kohberger. You're going to be the guy whose life I ruin. Kind of like Saul, right? Like, he woke up and he's like, you're going to be in this problem and we're gonna whatever. I digress. It just doesn't make any sense, right? Like, all right, so if there is somebody out there that hates Bryan Kohberger this much, who knows this much information about Bryan Kohberger, does he not have any idea of who this person could be? Why hasn't he come up with that information? You know what I mean? And so that doesn't make any sense. Now they say here, the knife sheath could have been planted by the real perpetrator. Now, if they try to say that law enforcement did this, are they saying that law enforcement is the real perpetrator? Because you can't, and this is the reason why I said this a long time ago, right? I said that the frame drop theory makes no sense because in order for somebody to frame Bryan Kohberger, they would have had to have had his DNA on that knife sheath at the time that knife was collected, right? Or seen or observed or whatever the case may be. And, initially, so when a call comes out like this, officers are going to arrive. Initial officers are going to secure the scene. And so unless they have that knife sheath just kind of riding around with them, that knife sheath had to have been there before, right? And it's seen on body cam, apparently. And there's also the lead detective who finds it, and it's collected, and then it's tested. Now, we know by December 10th, which is less than a month from the incident. And you have to also remember that there was vacation, holidays in between there, Thanksgiving. So on December 10th is when the FBI took over for Othram. And by December 19th, they had Bryan Kohberger's name. But on December 10th, Othram had exhausted all of their means, and they had their eyes on a couple brothers that they want to get more DNA from. Not necessarily to say that these brothers were the killers, but that their DNA would be needed to check off other people to point in the right direction, because I guess the amount of relatives that they had wasn't a lot. And so the FBI takes over then, but well, how long did it take for Othram to get to that point? I mean, it's not an overnight process. You have Thanksgiving in there, it's less than a month. So I'm assuming 2-3 weeks, right? Which is about that right amount of time there. That means that they had that information, that STR uploaded into CODIS, which is going to be documented as far as what date it was put into. That STR profile had to be created first, and that was created in the Idaho State lab. And if that was created immediately right away, and then they sent over that information for the STR profile so they can build up that tree, I mean, at what point are they intersecting that to put in Bryan Kohberger's DNA? It would have to be before it was entered into CODIS, because if it was afterwards, and this is what the judge said, because the judge even sat up and said, and I highlighted this. Judge Hippler said, "Are you saying that somebody infiltrated the national database like CODIS?" And the answer was no. Or I don't know what the answer was. I don't remember, to be honest with you. It was a confusing answer, but it didn't seem like she said yes. I think it was no. Well, anyways, that was the first thing that I had said too. I was like, what are you trying to say? Like, if for somebody to have framed him and it'd be like, all right, we can't find somebody, we're just going to frame anybody. They would have had to have entered into that database information in the CODIS. They would have had to, change the DNA sequence so that way it matches Bryan's at a later time. And this would have had to have been done under the nose of how many law enforcement agencies throughout a nation that are monitoring the CODIS, and there'd be no proof of it. I mean, it's impossible for that to have happened. Impossible. I mean, the police being involved in this is absolutely impossible. And so their only defense here at this point now is somebody either, accidentally bumped into him, or the real person framed him. And I just don't see the logic behind it, because then you got to go into why and all these things. And if once you have like Bryan Kohberger and you build his profile, right, it would be very similar to like a victimology, where you're building up, all right, look, I want to know everything about this guy, who his family are, who his friends are, who are his enemies, girlfriends, ex-girlfriends, where he worked, where does his money come from, where does he live, like so much stuff, right? You're going to do that with victims, you're going to do that with suspects. And as you're doing that with Bryan Kohberger, if there's somebody who just kind of hates him so much and he's the real victim here, there's going to be some evidence there that you're going to see, and apparently there's nothing there because it's him. I mean, when you do the criminology on him, it's down the line, man, down to his lack of feelings and remorse and feeling how people are sacks of meat, to the point where, he's egotistical. Some of the writings in his essay that point out how he's going to show these backwoods rural officers how to use a phone. Remember that? I want to teach them how to play with forensics, or not forensic, with the because of his expertise in technological forensic data or whatnot, cloud data. He wanted to do that. That was, that to me, when I read that, that was kind of an insult, the way he wrote it, the way it was portrayed in the PCA. And I think they took it that way as well. That was his expertise. That's what he claimed to be his expertise. That's what he wanted to teach people in the area, or how he wanted to assist law enforcement in the area. This was his second time around, and how do we know that? Because that was the essay for the fall. It even says in the PCA, he wrote in the fall. And we know that he had applied as well in the spring, because there's an email correspondence back and forth referencing him, and I think it's chief out of Pullman Police Department about their meeting and potential, of him having a position as an intern. Let's see. I just saw this. Unframed is the legal equivalent to my dog ate my homework. Just doesn't fly anymore. No, it doesn't. It was the scientific let me read this again. Continue reading. The scientific process of the STR comparison that confirmed the defendant's DNA match. The DNA found on the knife sheath. The state has no plans to use the preliminary assessment of the IgG at trial, and the defense has no plans to challenge the confirmatory of the STR comparison. Basically, in a big way, they're just saying that the state isn't going to challenge that it's Bryan Kohberger, or the prosecutor, the defense ain't, and that the only defense they have is a frame job theory. Now, what theory do you make sense for you guys? Or let me put it this way: what am I missing? What am I missing? Is there a avenue that I'm not seeing? Because to me, there's only a handful. It's either law enforcement did it and they're framing Bryan Kohberger, which we went through that process, and it's highly unlikely. It was an accidental frame where Bryan Kohberger's DNA accidentally got there, whether it be by an accidental rubbage by the real perpetrator, where he, made contact and that touch DNA traversed there, or it was a purposeful frame job by somebody who hates Bryan Kohberger. What's another avenue that I'm missing? Because obviously there's more than that. What would make you guys think that there's something that could be there? Let me know in the comment section. I'm gonna go through here. If you guys have put in any information, or if you guys have asked any questions, please ask them again, as I'll go through these pretty quickly. So Allison, thank you so much for being a newest member. We appreciate you. And then we have CJoy, a little late in today, after all previous arguments, to claim BK is now the patsy, reeks of desperation. I agree. I'm just gonna scroll up just a little bit so I can see if I can see anything else. All right. Did Ann Taylor admit Bryan being in Moscow the night of the homicides? I don't know, because it sure does seem that she admits that the footage on Ridge Road is of a 2016, 2014 Elantra, but that the other footage is not. Now, if she was referring, I think there was another time where she was referring Bryan Kohberger being in Moscow, but it was those 12 times that he was there, and it wasn't that he was at the house. But after she mentioned that, where it was like he was in Moscow, he did this, he did that, that was referencing the 12 times that he was purportedly stalking, right? That was when people were saying that he may have been stalking. Now, surveilling, I think, is the right term, but I thought that's what she was referring to. When it comes to the description of the vehicle, some people were pointing out the fact that I think she was pointing out to the Ridge Road camera that it being the wrong time and wrong place, being the white Elantra, or Bryan's Elantra. So I don't know. I got to reread it, but I don't think so. That was funny. I really did think it was Friday. I was getting ready for the weekend. It was a long day. I had to get do a wound change this morning. They were messing with my arm all day, which is why I took a nap. I was so exhausted after that. Put a couple stars, that way I can see if you guys are asking questions towards me and not just commenting in the chat with each other. I know there's a lot of great conversation in there. This is the one we just did. My bad. I'm aware that there's a clip going around of the 911 call. I will say that is the 911 call. I'm being framed as translation for I have no explanation for all the evidence against me. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes, please. Oh, nice. Thank you so much. Rebecca comes in with a $20 super sticker. Thank you so much, Rebecca. We appreciate that. Lord Helen says, crazy to me that people think that this is going to be an open and shut case when it goes to court. If it goes to court, I think that it'd probably be in the best interest of Bryan Kohberger already to probably plea out. I don't think he's going to have a very easy day in court. You know, this is just the information that we know. Can you imagine the information that we don't? You know, this is just a very, very thin layer of the top of the iceberg, you know. But once we find out that, you know, there's other accusations of maybe not necessarily illegal stuff, but disturbing behaviors, you know, what it was that got him fired from WSU, you know, all those things that come with that, it's going to be even worse for Bryan Kohberger. I don't understand why you think it won't be an open and shut case. You have a guy who self-reported that he was out and about during this specifically odd hour that these murders occurred on a cloudy, overcast, freezing night in in Idaho, in northern United States. And they capture his car. His phone was turned off during the commission of the crime. Yeah, the car matches his down to the front license plate. You know, let's talk about the stupid mistakes he made. He took his own car. He took his phone. He left part of the weapon behind, or the holder for the weapon. He left his DNA behind. There's a trail of purchases that he's made of the items that he may have used during the commission of the crime. Did I mention his DNA is there too? I mean, outside of having video of the guy actually committing the crime, how much more evidence do you really need? I mean, you got everything from DNA to video to financial receipts, the whole 9 yards, man. But we'll wait. We'll see. We'll see what happens. What is up with people blaming the family members and roommates? He was that callous. I mean, this isn't the first time. You know, people have done that for a while. I mean, look at what's going on in Karen Reed case and how they treat John O'Keefe's family. Or, people have turned on people. It's gotten worse now. I'll be honest with you. Like, it's not like it used to be. You know, the true crime mob that goes out there and like harasses family members and stuff, which I think is the minority, right? It's a small amount. But unfortunately, kind of like the squeaky wheel, right? I talk about the squeaky wheel. The squeaky wheel is usually not your best performing wheel, right? It's usually wrong. It's screwed up. Nothing's right. But it makes the most noise. It's kind of the same thing. Most screwed up people and whatever make the most noise that way. And it's unfortunate. It's a black eye to the community. Because it's one thing to say, all right, I have a problem with this, or I believe that this person might be innocent. And another thing to belittle and to harass family members, you know, victims. It's just ridiculous, to be honest with you. California Dreaming. What do you think of autism diagnosis? Do you know if he was diagnosed earlier in life or just recently? I don't know about with autism. I'm fairly positive that we're going to find out he was diagnosed with something. Now, he was treated for that visual snow stuff, which comes with usually some sort of mental a diagnosis. So I'm assuming that when he was writing those other things out about how he felt about his dad and stuff, that there was probably some sort of treatment and he probably did see somebody. Now, did they diagnose him with autism? I'm not sure. Did they diagnose him with being a psychopath or a sociopath, that's possible too. That is something that they want out. And when you look at why they say he's on the spectrum, it's because of, they use the term reciprocate or reciprocity, which basically means that he lacks the ability to share the same feelings as most people, or any feelings. That's those type of things. The tricky substitute car. So, like, if somebody wanted to frame Bryan Kohberger, right, they use somebody else's car because it's not their own. So I'm assuming that if somebody hates Bryan Kohberger that much, he might know that the person that hates him drives a car very similar to his. But if he's not pointing out anybody, and one of the reasons it could be because the guy that he may figure who hates him the most doesn't drive the same car. So where would this person have gotten the car? Would he have borrowed the car? And it's possible. I mean, borrowing the car, you're infiltrating, or you're adding another person into the formula of keeping your secret quiet, because that person would have known that they would have lent out their white Elantra the same night that a murder happened, where they're looking for a white Elantra in a small knit community, not so far away from either, whether he borrowed it from somebody in Pullman or Moscow. And they would have had to have kept quiet about the whole situation. And if they know Bryan Kohberger and they hate him that much, who are the people that surrounded him so much? I mean, it would have to have been one of his students, maybe, perhaps. Maybe he was hooking up with somebody, maybe their ex-boyfriend, those type of things. But yet you would assume that those type of people would be very easy to point out. And once you have information about somebody, it's fairly easy to figure out in real time if they were, not in real time, but in that moment, like in that general time, it's not that hard to figure out. Now, if this is something you're getting much later in time, like a cold case, a lot of evidence has been destroyed, right? But if during the time that you're doing your investigations, and somebody says, hey, you might want to look into this guy, and it's only been a few months or a few weeks, you can look in cameras, ring camera devices, those type of things to determine if this person left their house at night or if they stayed at home. Just kind of like how they caught Chris Watts, those type of things. You know what I mean? You're going to see something. The guy's going to drive by somewhere. He's going to have to walk down something that's going to be captured on camera nowadays. So, that's the part too. Did he steal a car? Well, that would have been reported. Rent a vehicle. I don't know what the police did, but I would have really, really hoped that they would have searched the rental places around to see if anybody rented out a white vehicle, those type of things. Let's see. Okay, explanation. Rando steals Bryan's car and knife is in it. Bryan turns off phone while doing the deed. Oh no, car's missing. Rides with friends to look and realize phone is off. And the culprit is passing him. So Bryan Kohberger is a criminal justice PhD student. Now, a lot of people look at Dylan and Bethany and condemn her because she didn't call 911 or report the crimes that were happening there. Should we not believe that Bryan Kohberger would have had more information, or would have known better to have called 911 and reported a vehicle stolen? All right. And did he just find it on his own and get it back? Because when he's pulled over going to Pennsylvania, he's in his car back. So he got his car back eventually. Did he vigilante himself out there, figure out who stole his car and find it back, like Neil what's that guy's name? Ian Wills. Joke's messed up anyways now, but the guy from Taken. Yeah. He had to have gotten his car back and don't report it. Why not say that to his lawyer, to his attorney, to law enforcement earlier on? Like, hey, you guys are looking for an Elantra, even though you're looking for one just slightly older than mine that still could be kind of visually the same. That night, my buddy or somebody took my car and I had my knife in there and I'm missing my knife sheath and my knife. I don't know where they're at. I think my buddy did it. Or I think this, whoever stole my car, they must have returned it and just not given me back my knife. I just don't think that's plausible. Was there a tip that alerted law enforcement originally to BK? If so, is there any information yet on this nature of the tip? Nope. It was the genealogy, the IgG. Why would they bring up autism before this being planted? To me, everything they come up with new makes him look more and more guilty. I agree. I have people on my own group that think Bryan was peeping Tom only, and that he was only a big peep that night, and that it was coincidental that the actual perpetrator walked in. Very coincident. All right, let's talk about Bryan Kohberger committing another crime, but not really wanting to fess up to that crime. Because this isn't the only time I heard this. I've heard that Bryan Kohberger was outside snorting coke, and the real person goes in there, kills everybody, and comes out, and he doesn't want to tell them, hey, I was doing drugs. It's not like he already lost his WSC job. It's not like he's ever going to be a police officer or any of those type of things. I think I'd rather cop out to saying, hey, I had some drugs on me and was doing drugs. It's not like they can arrest him for it. Yeah, you need proof. Just because somebody admits to something doesn't mean that they committed that crime or whatever the case may have been. But I mean, if he said that, then it'd be very easy for him to point out certain things, right? But peeping Tom drove by 4 different times, and the only time that he stopped to park to peep was the time in which the murders were happening. And yet a criminal justice student, again, everybody points at Dylan and Bethany and condemns her. These are the same people that'll do that, I bet you. Yeah, he didn't call 911. Why aren't you saying, shit, you deserve to be in jail? You didn't call 911. You were watching everything happen at the time that it happened. You took off like a bat out of hell, right? You saw it. He didn't call 911. They put him up on a pedestal and come up with every excuse. But no, that's probably the most ridiculous thing. If you're having to come up with that, like these scenarios thus far, like if that's your defense, like that tells you how weak your case is. When you're saying you're framed, it's because you have no defense. You're the legit guy. Yeah. Now, I'm not saying that nobody's ever been framed before in their life. You can look at some times where people have been framed, right? Let's look at one, Stephen Avery. Now, the second time, I'm not even sure about the first time, to be honest with you, but apparently something, proved that he was innocent. He got out. He was about to sue the police department and stuff like that, and the city because of a unlawful arrest and detention and conviction. And during this time, he ends up taking the life of some lady who I think she went to take pictures of his car, if I remember correctly. She was part of like Auto Trader or something like that, if my memory serves me correct. Well, anyways, let's talk about that case. So in the first one that he was supposedly guilty of, there was a sheriff who knew him, and he had problems. They had issues. Stephen Avery had been a guy who was a problem in the area. None of those things exist with Bryan Kohberger. He didn't know any of the Moscow Police Department personnel or the state police. Some may say, all right, well, maybe because he lived in Pullman and was part of the criminal justice department that may have knew some of the WSU officers. That's possible. But the Moscow Police Department and those guys, doubt it. And he's only there for a short period of time too. Right. I don't know. It's, I don't think so. Hold on. I lost where I was going with it. Let's see. Question: do you think Bryan's application of law enforcement will be used in court? Yep, 100%. They already are using it. They use it in the PCA. Sandy Little. Daniel, does Ann Taylor have to do what Bryan says even if she doesn't agree with it? For example, if he says go with the framed idea and she doesn't want to. I don't know, to be honest with you. I would assume that if Bryan Kohberger wanted to go one direction or with one theory, that she'd have to follow whatever it is, as long as it's within reason. But for her to allow it and say, all right, that's the theory we're going to go through, this is probably your last Hail Mary ditch effort, right? It's not it's not the first thing you want to pull out of the bag of tricks, right? Let's see. Altogether, there's going to be more to the story, is what I mean, against or for Bryan. I'm sure there's going to be a lot more to the story. Clearly, he isn't smarter than everyone else. If framing is your only defense, wasn't he eager to exonerate himself? Yeah, he sure was. Do I think that BK was paparazzi? I question that one because Bryan Kohberger did some things that night or throughout this entire time, he planned things out very well. And he did some things that typical criminals would do. He didn't do those things. Like pass by the house multiple times after the crime, right? Now, we know he went back at 9:30 the next day, but that was before the bodies were discovered. And that was before, there was news about the incident had occurred. There was no police camera or anything set up that could capture him going back and forth. Because once law enforcement is notified of a crime like this and they understand that they have, a homicide of this nature, at a certain point, they're going to put out a camera to capture the cars that are traveling in the area, because many times a person will revisit the crime scene. So he didn't do that. He was disciplined enough not to do that. He was also did this weird loop around to get back to Pullman to elude law enforcement. So to me, I thought that he wouldn't insert himself into the crime, and I felt like being online or trying to infiltrate social media stuff, talk about specifically the case and what is specifics of the case, would be a modern way of fitting yourself into the crime. Sometimes perpetrators will go to police like Richard Allen, or put themselves in search parties of crimes they committed, and et cetera, et cetera. It's not something that's uncommon. It's a way that a perp is trying to figure out what it is that police know, or if they're onto them, those type of things. And I assumed by going back and forth in conversation with us, it'd be one thing to visit like YouTube's or Facebook sites or whatever the case may be, discussion groups, and see what people are saying. But to actually add information that only he would know into it is something that I didn't see coming. Now, did he ever add anything that the police didn't put out there? I think the biggest thing that everybody looks at is the knife sheath, right? Because that's what he spoke about. He said that something to the effect that they're looking for a specific knife, so they must have found the knife sheath. That is something that is concerning, because at that time nobody knew he left the knife sheath. But I feel that FBI and law enforcement probably would have been able to figure out who Papa Rogers was based off of the things he was saying. I feel like he was being probably reported quite a bit, and I don't think they would have relied on a IGG if Bryan Kohberger was infiltrating or involving himself into the crime by putting things out there online that only he would know. So I'm fairly positive that Papa Rogers was taken serious by law enforcement and looked into. The fact that it wasn't what busted Bryan Kohberger leads me to believe that it's probably not him. Oh, thank you. I hope that was towards me. It says great analogy. I try to use some. What do I think about the use of chloroform? I mean, it's possible. I don't know. We'd have to wait for the toxicology reports because that would report it, right? He did break into, well, he allegedly rumored, it's been speculated that he broke into the WSU crime lab. Let's see. All right. What are your thoughts on the evidence seized from his car? Documents that a pink zipper found in a Ziploc in a green in another Ziploc. Well, there's something in there. I know they also found an iPad. Oh, I said that weird. An Apple iPad. I'm getting thirsty. An Apple iPad that it seems like they want out, right? There apparently is no DNA except for no DNA in the car. Ann Taylor mentioned they found some sort of spray of some sort all over the place. It was reported and rumored that he may have sprayed his car to see if there was any blood or whatnot. And so I wonder if that had anything to do with what she's talking about. But they want that thrown out, which would be also the ability to say that there was no DNA in the car. Now, for them to want to throw that, the ability to say there's no DNA in the car, must mean that whatever they did find is pretty huge, right? Because if it's something small, like, I don't know. It has to be big enough to say that that you're not willing to be able to throw out that you can say there's no DNA. Because even if it was like, the only thing that we found was the fact that he cleaned up his car really, really good. That don't mean anything, right? That doesn't mean he killed anybody. I would take that and still say, well, there's still no DNA in every crease, any cranny. There's no DNA. There's no DNA. I'd be harping on that. But to have that taken away from you as a defense, not be able to say that, to have the car thrown out or want the car thrown out, means that whatever it is that they found in it was just as damning as having DNA in the car, if that makes sense. Now, if it's the iPad, is that where he purchased the murder weapon? I don't know. Asperger's often goes undiagnosed in children or in childhood. However, he has family of mental health professionals. Comment by Steph C. Let's see. Maybe it was Brian's stunt double and stunt Delandra. That's funny, Tim. Daniel, I was wondering why you aren't able to let us hear the 911 call. And it's just not the right time right now. When I find out it's the right time and the right moment, I'll let it out. I just don't think it's appropriate right now. And when I get when I feel like I can do it, I'll put it out. I get it. Everybody wants to hear it. I thought that me putting out what I heard would be enough. At the end of the day, I don't know if it's going to be, used in trial in some way or form. I don't know. I'm going to hold off. I have it. I have the full thing. I have it enhanced and ready to rock and roll once I do drop it. It's just not going to be right now. If a frame drop was going to happen, they would have at least someone more obvious, like someone more of a lengthy criminal record, right? You would think that. Well, that's if police did it, right? If police framed him. Now, I doubt that's plausible at all, especially with so many different agencies that were involved in this case. I just don't think it's involved at all possible that could happen under the nose of several different law enforcement agencies. What's up, Nina Slow? Hope I said that right. Welcome to being the newest member. Check out the community post. I'll probably put it again afterwards, a new link to the Discord so that you guys can check us out. Who the hell rents a car to commit a homicide? I have no idea. But Aaron Hernandez rented a vehicle to commit an unaliving. They caught him due to the paper trail. Well, there you go. I know. You weren't being 100% on that one. Let's see. Man, I hate this chair. Do you guys hear it? It makes so much dang noise every time I move. It's so annoying. If he was being framed, wouldn't they be like? Wouldn't they like make it more obvious than one tiny spot of touch DNA? Like if they could have made it easier to show they were framing him. I agree. And why put it on the knife sheath? Why not put it underneath or on the hands of a victim or something more obvious? You're absolutely right. Absolutely right. The frame job does not make sense that way. Hold on. Shapeshifters frame. Yes, this is who I was trying to say. Liam Neeson. There you go. Messing up my words all over the place. Peeping Tom only, not murder. Right. No, I understand him being a peeping Tom only. If he was a peeping Tom, what prevented him from calling it in? Like 4 people just got their lives taken. And now he's on the books for murder and his life is on the line and he's still not willing to admit it. Oh, that's all I was doing. Yeah. A security guard gave Ellie his name. It wasn't just the IGG. I mean, his name was written down, yeah, on a paper or on, it was on a list with his car, 100%, yes. But even Payne said he never spoke to that officer until after he got Bryan Kohberger's name from the IGG. The moment that he spoke to that WSU officer was after the IGG was disclosed and Bryan Kohberger's name was given up. It wasn't beforehand. And so his name was in a list of a bunch of other names and vehicles, but Detective Payne nor the investigation had Bryan Kohberger under their radar at that point. Let's see. Daniel, can you go over the Bundy sorority girls' statements about their behavior after the attacks? Very similar to this case and justifies TMNBA. I'm not familiar with their behavior, to be honest with you. I'd have to get like Jaime on that one. I just kind of know some of the facts of the case. He pulled the knife out of the sheath, put it to... Okay. All right, considering peeping Tom again, it would explain the pings, the car, the path, the timeline, and him parking. If the jury heard that, the defense would easily ignore the DNA. If the jury heard that defense, they would easily ignore the DNA. I don't think they would. I think if the defense heard that, they would laugh. I'll be honest with you. Like it's not. I don't think so. You know, if somebody told me no, I have not said this throughout this entire time. I have lied to where I was at because I said I was at the Wildlife Park and went westbound and south, and I wasn't in Moscow. I am now saying that I'm telling the truth. And what I was doing was peeping and tomming, and that's why I was in the area. It doesn't make sense why I didn't just park back there and sit there, but I passed by 3 different times before I parked there and sat there for approximately 12 minutes. And I peeled out of there because I saw what happened. And although I am probably the one person that is the most informed and most to believe or the most that you would expect to call 911 and report what was happening, because you don't have to report that you were touching yourself in your car watching something happen. You can obviously just say that you were just driving by. I mean, he could have reported it anonymously, right? There are so many ways he could have done it if this was the case. To have reported somebody else, to have reported something else that he had seen. Now, after his arrest and up to this point, he still can't even tell anybody where he was at that night. He doesn't want to give his alibi. saying that he was out there watching from outside in and just kind of looking from his vehicle. There's nothing as messed up as that is. If he's not trespassing on somebody's property and he's sitting in his car outside, there's nothing illegal about that. It's a public road. Now, I do think that maybe perhaps being back there is part of the apartment complex and it's not a public thing after all or anymore, but that's just a difference of in the moment. We don't know that, right? Whether or not he belongs there or if he's part of the apartment complex, if his vehicle is just parked there, unless they have to have some certain sticker to be back there. Now we're getting into specific details, but anyways, this person would have known and have had knowledge more so than anybody else to have contacted law enforcement. And thus, now that his life is on the line, after spending how many years in jail, he is still held on to that piece of information that he was just a peeping Tom. He's not even arguing this. This is just some things that people have made up so they can come up with an excuse so they can put their heads down at night and still have a reason to, believe that their tormentation of victims' families and victims is justified based off of some weird belief that makes zero sense. Like, oh, he's a peeping Tom. Like, in what document or in what anything does the defense say that that's even his defense? There's nothing. That's just something made up. I mean, I could say, well, shoot, he got abducted by aliens. And what had happened was right before they abducted him, they abducted the real killer. And what happened was they put the real killer back in Bryan Kohberger's car. And they had Bryan Kohberger. That's how the real killer got Bryan Kohberger's DNA, because he was in Bryan's car while Bryan was up in the ship. The real killer committed the crime, and then the aliens figured out they made a mistake and then swapped him back. And that's about as believable as a peeping Tom story. Just being honest, and if the defense heard that or the jury heard that, I honestly think they would laugh. It's not like they'd be like, oh, well, now it makes sense why his DNA in his car and his phone was off and everything. Gee willikers. He's innocent. I'm sorry, guys. That is funny. I mean, that one's funny. My vote is that BK is not Papa Roger. I don't understand why people focus on this instead of the facts. I don't know. He has no friends, failed at his job, can't get a girlfriend, can't get into law enforcement roles, so he thought he'd show them and commit the perfect crime. I think that has something to do with it. I'm not going to deny that. I think that has something to do with it. And like for this one, Detective Moore goes, there's no photo or video of a license plate of the driver in any of the evidence in Moscow. So that would be true whether or not that was Bryan Kohberger was your suspect or your favorite suspect. You can choose out of all of them. So because there's no video of a license plate, that means that this crime should never go solved. I mean, and this is why people frustrate me, because they just don't know what they don't know. These are ignorant folks. And I don't mean that in an ugly manner. I'm not saying that you're stupid. I'm just, you don't know what you don't know. There's more than one way to tell if somebody did something. You don't need to have everything, right? Like in geometry, like if somebody were to say 4 plus X equals 8, well, I mean, not geometry, algebra. Like in algebra, 4 plus X equals 8. Well, what is X? X is 4. Well, now, there's ways to figure that out. I'm not looking at a videotape of 4 being covered over or masked by an 8 or by an X, right? That's not what's happening there. You have to be able to figure out, use context clues and critical thinking and the whole 9 yards to figure out that X is 4, based on the way your thinking is. Well, hey, I don't got a video of X being 4, so X could be 6, even though the answer says 4 plus X equals 8. I'm going to say X is 6 because I don't got video evidence of X ever being 4. mean, that's literally what you sound like. It's ridiculous. Ridiculous. For those who don't know, Ann admitted that Bryan's car was approximately 1/3 mile of the crime scene. I don't remember that being said that way. I'm just being honest. I'm a very straightforward guy. I'll be honest when I see things one way, and I'll be honest even if it doesn't go my way, regardless of what the Kohbergers say. I'm still on. I don't recall it being read that way, but I will say that. What evidence do they have to prove guilt? Jesus Christ, there's quite a bit. There's so much. I mean, we spoke about so much of it already. It's quite a bit. There was chloroform. It was the secondary location. If there's chloroform, it was for the secondary location. I don't know. I don't think so, but there could be. Where's my gallon of water? Right on here. I got to drink more now. You know what's in a crime lab? Luminol. That's true. Especially there, I mean, it's when you have criminal justice and forensics as a part of studies at a school, there's going to be some stuff like that there. Yeah, no doubt. Reese says, no sub Rosa, I don't. That's why I ask, how do they construct from 0.068 to 2? Got to show their work and be able to duplicate. But that's on information that doesn't really matter, right? Like nothing that the IGG has, nothing. There's nothing in the, like there's nothing that the IGG is being used to get a warrant for, nothing. And you know how you check if the IGG was done correctly? This is how you check, right? So you have the STR profile, right? That STR profile is put to the side because that belongs to the person. And you create this S&P profile in this family tree. And then you come up with a name based off of that family tree of the person that you suspect to be the person's DNA, right? And so then you go and you find this person. And what you do is you secretly or by asking or arresting, whatever the case may be, but you get that person's DNA. And what you do is you compare it to the original STR DNA profile. Now, what tells us if the IGG was done correctly is whether or not that STR profile and the profile of the person that the IGG pointed to matches. If it matches, that means it was done right because that's who the IGG said it was going to be. If it doesn't match, if it says this is a first cousin or an uncle or something to that nature, then that means you were close, but not there yet. You need to do more research. You need to figure out, who is this person's nephew, grandson, whatever, right? So that's how you test it. So what happened here? There was the STR profile, and it came back to an unknown person. They did the IGG, came back to Bryan Kohberger. They tested Bryan Kohberger's DNA to that STR profile, and what would you know? I think it was like 8 octillion times to 1 that it was somebody else's or his to someone else's, meaning that you could get every person alive to have ever been born and created, and you still couldn't find another person that could match. That's how closely it matched to him. So the IGG is just a tip at the end of the day. Like if you wanted to go in there and say, hey, they didn't show their work, they didn't show how they were able to duplicate this, then throw it out and throw out everything that the IGG was used. Every warrant that we see the IGG was used on. Oh, wait, there isn't one. So what are you going to throw out? That's the problem. There's nothing to throw out. There's nothing. Like it's just an argument just to have an argument that doesn't make any sense, because at the end of the day, when you are able to say, all right, did it match up or did it not match up? Was it proven to be true or was it proven to be false? It was proven to be true and it matched up. What else do you think was in the car besides the iPad receipts? Wasn't there a box with the IDs in the glove? inside of the glove box or something like that? Or was that inside the car? I mean, the house. I'm not sure. Daniel, if no other creators get access to 911 audio, how did you and Gray Hughes get it? Magic. What if you put earbuds in? In for what? Or maybe there's something else. That's why I like the stars. I apologize, guys. I like the stars because I'm not sure if you're talking to me or someone else. We need to start a fundraiser. Oh, please, because can y'all hear this? I sound like, what was it? One of those rap songs that start. Man, when I was a kid, there was this rap song that started. It was a bed shaking, but it sounded just like this. I can't remember the song, but when I was younger, it was a hit. What do you think he did with the knife? Did Ellie search for it? I'm sure they searched for it. I have no idea what he did outside of hide it, disclose it. May have thrown it in the river. I'm not sure. He was a peeping Tom in PA. Peeping Toms always progress to the next level. So why is it so hard for people to make that leap? I mean, if that's true, I'm not necessarily certain that he was a peeping Tom in PA. I think it's possible. I think with the stuff that I know about that he did in PA, that I would say it wouldn't be unlikely that he did that. I do know that he did allegedly follow people. I'll say that. Do you think the girls they were interviewed multiple times and cleared? I'm not sure if that was to me. Pings are evidence of surveillance, not stalking, because the girls didn't know. That's true. That was a true thing that a good observation from Jennifer Coffindaffer, former FBI agent, we had on the show. If you have not checked that out, go check that out. We interviewed her a couple of weeks ago. Go check that out. Go check out the 911 audio breakdown. I went through everything that's in there, guys. There's some parts that once I feel comfortable in going ahead with releasing the audio, that I do want to hear and go over with you guys and get you guys' opinion as far as what you guys hear. Like, for instance, the part where she goes, poor Kaylee, and there's something else. I want you guys to maybe you guys can tell me what it is. I don't know if it's the right move yet too. I mean, this is a sensitive stuff. I haven't spoken with, I don't know if all the family members and every family member of all the victims are okay with it, or have heard it, or know about it. You know what I mean? I'm not in contact with all of them, with a few, but not all. More than you guys think. And so there's a lot of reasons why I don't want to release it. Connor makes a great point. Why would he start peeping as soon as everyone went to bed and the lights went off? What? The WTF was he peeping in the pitch black? I love this. This is a great comment, Connor. I appreciate that. You win the comment of the day. With that being said, I want to thank Rebecca Bruce for being a new member and Marty for being a new member. That's going to do it for us tonight. We just hit over the hour and 15-minute mark. Make sure you make sure you subscribe, guys. If you like this will tell YouTube that you want more of it. That I know hitting the notification button should get you notified of every time I go live, but it doesn't. I'll probably go live this weekend. I have full intentions on doing that. So you're going to have to hit that notification button, which means, I know tomorrow's not Saturday, so it'll probably be in a couple of days. It took me a little while to figure that out. I'll be honest. I thought it was Friday for a minute there. I am kind of disappointed that it's not. Gray Hughes said he's going to release it soon. I really hope he, when he does, so be it. Maybe at that point I'll release mine. But until then, I don't think that's the right move. And I'm not Gray Hughes. So I prefer being Daniel J. With that being said, you guys have a great night. Peace.